There we go. I'll face you this way. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. And I'm going to mute myself here. There we go. Awesome. Well, hey, everybody. There we go. There's no lag. Can you hear me all right? Is it coming through? Check, 1, 2.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. Awesome. Hi, Aaron Brown. It's nice to see you. Kind of. I mean, it's nice to know that you're there. It's not kind of nice to see you. Are we waiting on anything, Joshua?
No. So I didn't receive any emails.
Okay.
So we can get started.
Okay.
At any time. We have 5 people watching right now.
Right.
Some people might be a little bit late, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can start whenever you like. Hi, 5 people that are watching. Awesome.
Okay. So you want me to just sort of introduce what's going on here?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Gregory Carr. Okay. Tim Robertson says Gregory Carr.
Oh.
I don't know what that means.
Yes. Okay. Well. Welcome everyone to our YouTube live stream.
It means nothing, by the way, Tim says. Gregory Carr, I'm assuming. It means nothing.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry to throw off your flow right there. I apologize.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Okay.
It is all good. As I mentioned in an email or a Facebook post or an Instagram post, we are doing a Q&A session where we will be able to, or you all will be able to ask us questions about anything, really. I put in a couple ideas, life, God, but really it could be anything. And as I mentioned in the post, you can either send the questions to my email, or you could just post them in the chat as well, and we will see if we can address those here.
Yeah, they could also text them in if they like to our number.
Sure.
705-692.
Do we want to use the church's number?
Yeah, and then it'll show up here.
Okay.
Yeah. And unless they've already told us their name, we wouldn't know who it's coming from. So if you're feeling like you want to be anonymous, that's a way for you to submit a question anonymously.
Right.
Cool. Awesome. So I have a question to start, if we don't have any questions yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So how many?
No, we don't have any questions yet.
Yeah. So how many fish did you catch this week?
I think me personally, I caught about 4.
Okay. Did you eat any of the fish that you caught?
In total, our group got 16.
Wow. Did you eat any of them?
Yeah. Yeah, we did. So we ate about 8 of them.
Okay.
And then we had we turned them into fish tacos.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Yeah. I've never eaten the fish that I've caught before, so that was kind of cool.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. Aaron wants to know if he's the only one saying anything in the Q&A. Yeah. So Aaron, it appears so far, other than Tim, who said Gregory Carr just to confuse us because he later said that it means nothing. And then he says nay, yet again, with such clarity.
Although that could very well be Ollie. It's
Okay.
probably Ollie, actually.
Right, yeah. Ollie.
Hi, Robertsons.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, so there's really no agenda other than we just wanted an opportunity to connect and to get to know one another. And you guys can ask any question that you want to ask. And sure, it can have something to do with God or the church or whatever you like, but it doesn't necessarily have to, right? Like you could ask Joshua, you know, how he grows such an amazing beard. And that's not something that most people are able to do. So if you want some tips, I mean, I'll give you the answer right now. It's all about follicle stimulation, right? It's, the oiling and the follicle stimulation.
For sure.
So, but you could ask anything you like. And if you don't mind them being, people know who it's coming from, you can drop it off in the live chat there right now. Or, I mean, it could be Ollie saying it under Tim's name. So, you know, it's still somewhat anonymous there, I suppose. You can put it in the chat. You can email it to Joshua.
Do you want me to post the number in the chat?
Sure. Yeah. Or you could text your question to 705-692-1658. And it'll show up on our end, and it'll just show up as your number, not as your name. And even if we know who it's coming from, we wouldn't share anything without you like saying, hey, share my name with the question. So, right? I mean, you wouldn't do that.
Right.
Yeah, he wouldn't do that.
Oh, personally, no, I wouldn't do that.
He wouldn't do that. Come on, guys. There we go. Sweet. Okay. All right. So I don't know if you see that or not, but Aaron has a question for both of us. He says, what got you to be a pastor?
Okay.
I was kind of curious. And so my story, the shorter version is that I didn't start off, Ollie, I think, says the journey is the dream. So I don't know what that means. That's just confusing. But my story is that
It's wisdom.
It's wisdom. Yeah, sure. It's probably in Proverbs somewhere. So I started off actually working for local government and had a government job in the city of Guelph, and was like using all of my free time to volunteer in student ministry at the church that we were attending, and absolutely loved it. And Stephanie, my wife, went on a trip with the students while I had to work. They drove down to Texas, and one of the other volunteers, I don't know if you know this guy or not, Scott Fitch. Do you know him? Or the name?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. So Scott said to Stephanie, you know, like, you guys spent all your time doing this. Have you ever considered ministry? And then Stephanie came home and said to me, have you ever, like, what do you think about this? This is what Scott said. And I was like, so angry. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. It was like the end of the line right there. But it wasn't much longer after that I felt like God was actually asking me to leave what I was doing and invest in going back to school and stepping into pastoral ministry. And it turns out that the way that God wired me was that I was passionate enough about ministry that I was using all of my free time to do any of it, that actually that was a kind of a piece of the sign of what God wanted me to be doing with my life, as opposed to paperwork and driving in circles for a living.
Right.
Yeah. And now with my free time, I can still drive in circles if I choose to.
Right on.
Mm-hmm. What about you?
Well, I felt a call to ministry ever since I was 13.
You go ahead.
Ever since I was 13. So I wanted to be a pastor since then. And my dad was also a pastor as well. So I think that had a little bit of an influence on it for sure.
Right.
Especially what school I ended up going to. I mean, me and my dad ended up going to the same Bible college and stuff like that. But for me, I knew that I wanted to be a pastor when I was like 13, and all my friends still wanted to be in the NHL or be a rock star or something like that. And I just wanted to preach. I wanted to do ministry. I wanted to do it all. And for me, that just really stuck out. And I got a lot of experiences in that world growing up, and I learned a ton. I grew to love it more and more, and God kind of continued to share bits and pieces of what he wanted me to do in ministry, and where I was supposed to go, like masters and stuff like that. So for me, I would say that there's a heavy influence in my life already, but at some point, I think especially at 13, I had to make it my own, right? And I had to decide that, no, you know what, this is something that I really, really want to do, and no one's gonna tell me otherwise, and no one's necessarily holding my hand anymore. So
right.
And as I've continued to learn and continue to grow, I just fall in love with it more and more. So
nice. Awesome. Aaron, what do you think? Is that all right? Does that answer your question? Because we do have another question here. Joshua, I don't know if you saw it or not. I think you did. All right. So we got a question here. I think it was sent to you, but we can both take a look at it. It says, if I'm angry at God, how would I go about fixing our relationship? I lost a lot of important people who guided me spiritually this year. And I feel so lost. Yo, what happened here? There we go.
Oh, okay. Oh.
There we go. There we go.
I lost a YouTube connection here.
Oh, you did?
Cut out on me.
Okay. Well,
we're back. I'm back.
You're back. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they still see you through here. Right? So they see you, even if, as long as you're on Zoom, they see and hear you, right? Okay. Yeah. So the question is, how do you repair your relationship with God? If I'm angry at God, how do I go about fixing our relationship? I lost a lot of important people who guided me spiritually this year, and I feel so lost. So that's a super good question.
Yeah, for sure. I'm assuming maybe this person means fixing their relationship with God.
I think so.
Or their relationship with these people who they lost.
Right. I get the impression, I don't know, it's an anonymous question, that they've that maybe people who have been spiritual influences in their life have died. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and whoever sent that question whoever sent that question can text us if we're wrong, and we'll, kind of readjust here. Right. Yeah. So how do you fix your relationship with God? I'm upset that I've lost so many important people in my life. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that one of the first things that comes to mind for me is really taking a step back and really evaluating those situations and really taking the time to think them through and what actually took place and where God fits in with all these things. Right. Our lives aren't perfect, but the one thing that stays consistent through it is God, actually. Mm-hmm. And even though bad things do happen, he can be right there to support us and guide us along in our way, even if as we maybe lose some others in our lives who were guiding us spiritually at the time.
Right. Yeah. So I think, hi, Tweak Out, Freak Out, and Candace. I think that something that I would add to that, first of all, is I'm sorry that you lost those people that were important in your life. And I think it's okay for you to be angry at God. And I want you to know that he's not abandoning you, even though it really feels like there's like that gap, that God isn't walking away from you, and he can handle the fact that you're mad at him. And that's okay. I don't think any of us would want to stay in that place, because I mean, it's not healthy and it's not productive to just remain there forever. And I don't want to sound callous,
Sure.
but so I do want to communicate my care and concern for you. But at the same time, I also would really come back to the idea of what has God actually promised us? Because I think sometimes some of the anger and frustration that we have at God is rooted in a misunderstanding of what he's actually promised. And that we look at the promises of God where he says that he'll never leave us or forsake us, and we interpret that in our own lives, and we say nothing bad will ever happen to me. And that's just not true, right? Like, we live in a world where those things are going to happen. And what God says isn't bad things are never going to happen to you. He says that when bad things happen to you, I'm going to be just right there with you the whole way through. And so, in terms of fixing your relationship with God, I'd say first, number one, it's not broken. And number two, that God is still right there with you, and it's okay for you to express how you're truly feeling with God. He can handle that. I mean, if you took a look at, quite a bit of the Psalms in the Old Testament, you're going to see like I like the Psalms because it makes me feel better about being an emotional roller coaster sometimes. And so I spoke one day on one of the Psalms, and I did a theme park translation, a roller coaster translation of the Psalm. And so for every every time that things seem to be going well, and he's like, like the Lord is my shepherd, all these things, I'd be like, click, 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 like going up the roller coaster. And then like 3 verses later, it's like, why are you so downcast, my soul? Right? I've been forsaken. And so I go click, 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 right? And so it's like this life is going up and down like this, but always being able to bring back to this place of God isn't forsaking us, meaning he's not leaving us in the middle of that crap. And it also reminds us that like in this world, there will be trouble, which God promises. But I think there's this, I don't know, you might disagree, I don't know, this like natural, like almost supernatural dissatisfaction that we have with the ways of this world, because we were not created to be in this world forever. Like, we are created to be in relationship with him eternally. And so there's always going to be this piece of like, man, I don't fit. And it's because you don't entirely fit. Like, we weren't made for this, right? But I think, so, kind of bringing it back, your relationship with God is not broken. He is not walking away from you, and he didn't promise that bad things wouldn't happen. It's okay to bring those to him, and it's okay to say, yeah, that really sucks, and I feel like crap. But it doesn't change how much he loves you. It doesn't change how he sees you. It doesn't change how he feels about you. It doesn't change whether he's close or not. And then there will always be those dissatisfactions. And that's because God created you to be in an eternal relationship with him in heaven. And that's our forever home. And so I think a piece of that dissatisfaction is because he wants us to be setting our eyes upon that. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? I don't know. What do you think, Joshua?
Yeah. And if I could just add a practical point here.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that Pastor Kyle said was really, really good, in that remembering the promises of God in the Bible. I know that in my past, I've had such a habit of knowing fun facts about the Bible, like people's crazy names and wild stories, but actually knowing what God says about me in the Bible wasn't something that I was really familiar with. And so what I did was I looked up on some website, like, the promises of God that he has for us in the Bible. And I copied and pasted them, put them on a Word document, and I printed them out and I put them on my wall.
Right.
I actually still have them on my wall today. And every day I would like read a promise or two, you know?
Right.
And it would just remind me of who God is, you know, maybe about his goodness or his faithfulness, you know, his forgiveness and salvation, things like that. And so it just reminds us that even in maybe some tough situations, it reminds us of who God is overall. Because I think sometimes we choose to forget about certain parts of God, or we prioritize things more than others. And I mean, for whoever this person is, if you want to send me a message, I can send you this document. And you can do the same thing as me. You could change it up, but just as a practical help, because I know it's helped me, right? Because I needed to remind myself, right, God really will never leave us or forsake us.
Right.
Even if that means having some struggles in between. I know I have had struggles in my life, but God has promised me that he will never leave me or forsake me.
Right.
So I can find real comfort in that regardless.
Yeah. Now I want to know what your favorite name is in the Bible, since you brought it up. You said you love facts.
Mephibosheth is pretty good. I like Mephibosheth.
I don't even think I can say that. It's crazy. Yeah.
Mephibosheth. I'm probably saying it wrong.
Right. I think the funniest one is Eutychus, because it rhymes with uterus. And I think that's funny. A good one. Yeah. But then it's hard to kind of,
true.
You know, hear the rest of the story. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's good. And I think the one last thought I have on that question is that if these individuals were, you know, spiritual people in your life that were kind of leading you and pointing you towards Jesus, that they've moved on into their home with Jesus, and that they would be sitting on the other side being like, you know, I understand that there's grief, but they're on the other side being like, don't be sad for me. I'm home. That, you know, like, don't be mad at God. This is where I wanted to be, right? Like, you can read about Paul in the New Testament saying, Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, I love that one too. That's a good one. I had a bird when I was in elementary school named Nebuchadnezzar, actually. And give all the credit to VeggieTales for teaching me that one. But, you know, so what was I saying there? That those individuals be like, don't be sad for me, that continue to chase after what I had been showing you, and because this is leading to a good place, right? I think that's good. We've got another question, right? Okay. Do you see it? What's it say?
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you get over your fear and doubt when you think God is asking you to talk to someone?
Right.
If I was to answer this question just from like personal experience, I would say just do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The first couple times are going to be difficult. Absolutely. You're going to be scared out of your mind.
Right.
But honestly, as you continue to do it, your fear actually turns to excitement. Mm. And you start to anticipate those moments, and fear might come up every once in a while. Like, I've talked to a lot of people, but I still get scared. Absolutely. But there are things that you can do to prepare in advance, I guess. But at the end of the day, you have to try, right? And in actually doing it, I think sometimes we realize that our fears were lying to us, and it's maybe not as scary as we thought it was.
Right. Yeah, sure. I agree. I'd say you just need to.
Now, I will say that when we do it, that we should maybe do it with some other people so that they can encourage us, that we don't always feel like we are by ourselves and on our own. Especially at the beginning, right? It's okay to do it in groups. It's okay to have someone to help you out.
Right. But I think the other reality is that there are going to be moments where Jesus asks you to do something that you're not in a pre-planned group.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I think that, like, the way that you kind of get over that and move past it is is the same way that you get over it and you move past it with anything else that makes you nervous, right? Like the first time that I spoke in front of a group, like I was scared, I was nervous, and I bombed, right? But like
sure.
you get your reps in, right? And like the first time the first time you step out and you try a new sport and you're afraid that you're going to suck at it, you feel scared and nervous about doing that, right? Like I remember the first time that I prayed out loud after I had become a Christian in like this group prayer, and I'd been going to the group prayer for like, I don't even know how long I'd been going, but I had never said anything out loud, and I felt like I really needed to. And I was so scared that like, and I don't even know what I was scared of, right? Like I don't know where that fear was coming from, but I was scared that if I were to like say something wrong, I don't know, that like I didn't think God was going to smite me for being wrong, right? But like maybe these people would think I'm ridiculous. I don't know, right? Like there are so many things in life that we're scared of doing for the first time. And something that builds our confidence is just deciding to do it. Like my son is terrified of trying new food. Like he's got a genuine food phobia. And so we've had to like really work with him. And like I sit there and I hold his hand. I'm like, it's all right, buddy. I know it's scary and you're such a brave kid and we're going to do it together. Right. And I hold his hand as he like takes the smallest little nibble of a cucumber. And for him, that's a huge deal. Right. But like when it comes to feeling like God is asking you to do something, I think that like there are those baby steps that like God is probably not asking you to do something that's like crazy on day one, right? Like you can read about like miracles happening in the New Testament, how like Jesus heals a blind man by spitting in his eye. He's probably not going to ask you to do that, right? But if God gives you, a nudging and urging, an urge to go and speak with somebody, honestly, I felt like I was called out on this in university, that I was more afraid, and I still get, I still need to kind of come back to this idea that I was more afraid of what other people would think of me than what God had in store for that person. And so on one hand, I feel like, okay, you can be, so I asked myself the question, well, a couple of things. Number one, I asked myself the question, has God ever abandoned me? Right? Like, has God ever abandoned me at all? And I'll like sit there and I'll try and think of a time when he didn't show up. And I can't, right? Like there have been seasons in my life where I will like write down and journal the incredible things that God has done in my life. And then when I have a season where I'm like, I'm really nervous about doing something and I'm feeling like I don't have enough faith, I go back and I look at all of those things that God has done. And it encourages me in my faith, right? And then I also ask the question, like, if this really is God and I allow my fear to make the decision, right? Because you can feel the fear and that's real. And I think it would be ridiculous for us to sit here and be like, well, just don't be afraid, right? Like, well, just don't feel that, because you feel it, right? But if that really is God asking, you say, am I more concerned about what they might think or what others may think? Or am I more concerned about that person maybe missing out on something that God wants to do in their life? Right. And so I've got a friend who like stepped out, he started his own business, and almost like for the first couple years, almost all of his clientele were strangers that he met at Costco, where he felt like God was asking him to go talk to them and he had no idea why. And like, he'd just go up and be like, hey, I'm Rob. And they'd start this conversation. And then through that, he'd find out something that like they were actually in need. They were actually in need of what he was able to do for them. And it launched his business, and he's doing very well now because of it. Right. So I don't know, like, so just, it sounds callous again, but there's always a reason not to, but I always have to bring myself back, because even now I still feel nervous sometimes when I feel like, man, God is asking you to go and talk to that person about fill in the blank, or God is asking me to pray for somebody to be healed. There's still always, if I'm honest, a little bit of nervousness, but I have to weigh what's more important.
For sure.
Right? Yeah. What is more important here? Yes, I can be wrong, and that is okay. It's okay for me to be wrong. And like, what if I'm wrong? It's still going to like pray for the person. I'm still going to care for them. I'm
Absolutely.
going to have a nice conversation. I'm not going to be rude, right? And they walk away. Well, they walk away, and that's okay. But if God really is asking me to do this, it's because he wants to do something awesome. And I don't want them to miss out on what he wants to do in their life. Right? I don't know. Anything to add?
For sure. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, Emily, maybe you might be like me. Like, I'm somebody who really thinks things through. You know, I start asking questions on every angle, and I consider every aspect of what's going on in that situation. One of the things that I've started doing when I feel like God is asking me to do something is I really try to avoid those questions. And yeah, we need to be safe and we need to do things properly. But for me, it's I want to put my trust in what God says. And if I'm obedient to him, often God actually surprises me. And the questions that I have become almost irrelevant. Like, what if I mess up? What if it doesn't go really well? And then I go do it and it actually goes better than I ever thought it could, because God was in the lead and I wasn't even in the lead in the situation. So I know it might be hard because I've been the same way, where you ask a lot of questions, but really try to see what God is asking you to do through those questions. Push them aside, focus on him, and see what he does, because often he surprises you and you get a little chuckle, because afterwards it's like, oh God, why did I ever even worry? Why did I ever even ask those questions? What a silly thing for me to do. Right. And so just focus on what he's asking you to do. And
Sure. Yeah. And then just one more thing that I'd add, like, be safe in the process, right? Like, as a young female,
for sure.
Right? Like, I wouldn't go downtown to like some random guy on your own, right? Like that, use wisdom in that process, right?
Yeah. It's discernment in every area. You're discerning what God is asking you to do. Right. But you're also discerning, is this appropriate? Is this safe? Is this okay? Is there another way that we could do this? Right. I think the closer we actually get to God, the more our conversations grow through prayer, and the easier it is for us to just go into a situation and understand what he's asking us to do and how to be safe in that situation and all of that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so there's a question here. Aaron asked one. How would you invite a friend who's never heard of God but thinks it sounds stupid or church is stupid? By the way, if my kids are listening to this right now, I think I said stupid in some sort of gathering, and my kids overheard it, and we didn't think they were listening at all. And it was like mic drop moment. Their like jaws hit the floor, and Stephanie texted me and she's like, you're really going to have to explain this to the kids when you get home, because they're really upset. Like that. They feel like that's the worst word to say. No. So if my kids are watching, you would put me in a very awkward situation. So let's hope that that's not happening. But if this friend thinks it's stupid or God is stupid, how would you invite them if they're not the least bit interested in God's word? Well, I think if they are your friend, that you should be able to be honest in your relationship with your friend about the things that are most important to you. And that understand that your friend is entitled to have their opinions and their beliefs, and that they can be different from yours, and that they can value and like or be interested in different things. But like, if your friend is asking you to pretend to not have any sort of spiritual life while they're there in the room, I don't really think that's a friendship, right? That like we say here, or I say often, I'll be the real me, you be the real you, and together we'll meet the real Jesus. And I really do mean that. Like, there are people in my life who are not followers of Jesus, who are atheists, who are agnostic, who are angry towards, the gospel, the cause of Christ. And I don't feel like it's my job to convince them otherwise, but I will call them on it and say, hey, if you're asking me to be somebody that I'm not just to appease you, maybe not being offended or not hearing about something you're not interested in, then you're not really my friend. Because my friends care about me and who I am and what defines me. And I can care about those things in somebody else's life. And so when my friend who's in a band that plays music that I would not put on my playlist invites me to his show, obviously pre-COVID, I try to go. Not because I'm like, man, the music is amazing, but because this person is somebody that I care about, and this is something that's very important to them, and they're inviting me to be a part of it. And so I'm honored by that. And so if that's not reciprocated in some capacity, I don't mean like always agreeing, but if it's not reciprocated in some capacity and they're like, in order to be my friend, you got to shut that whole thing off. That's not a real friend. That's ridiculous. They're asking you to be somebody that you're not. And so you don't need to be belligerent. You don't need to convince somebody why they're wrong, right? Like how productive has that ever been? Right? Like it's not very productive. You don't need to convince them that they're wrong, but I'm just gonna be like, listen, this is me and this has changed my life and I'm not gonna hide it. And so, I'm fine with putting that on display, and that's not the same thing as me like standing on a soapbox and preaching downtown. I'm also not going to do that. Right? Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I would say too, Aaron, that it seems like the way that you worded the question, there could be a lot of assumptions going on there. I feel like a lot of younger people today, they're no longer growing up in a culture that is used to church here in Canada.
Yeah.
It's a very foreign concept to them. And so for them, they may say it's not cool or that church is whatever.
Yeah.
But for them, they just might not know. And so Aaron, maybe you could help them out. Maybe you could help answer some of the things that they're confused about or they don't understand. If you feel like maybe you wouldn't be able to, maybe you could send them our way and we can have a conversation with them. Assumption can be a very dangerous thing, right? Because they kind of maybe have made this idea in their head about what it means to be a Christian, what church is and what the Bible is. That could be completely wrong, and they'll continue to live their life like this unless someone shows them what is actually true. And so maybe that's your job. Maybe that's something God's asking you to do, Aaron, or maybe we can help you out in that. But assumptions are a dangerous thing, and we need to be able to set the record straight. And if they still have an issue with what we have to say, that's a whole other conversation. But at least getting the assumptions and the misunderstandings out of the way so that they know what we're actually about. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. My kids' friends, some of my kids' friends, it's not a matter of like them feeling like, man, church is stupid. They just genuinely don't know about it. Like they don't, I had kids who, some of my kids' friends, and my kids are like grade 1, grade 3, and they didn't, like, when they asked what their dad does for a living, they say he's a pastor. They just don't know what that means. They have no frame of reference. Whereas when I was growing up, everybody would go to church. It didn't mean it changed your life. In fact, it was like, I don't know, maybe probably worse, that like you could just show up in the room. You think, well, I checked the box, so therefore I'm good, right? Like, obviously that's not healthy and that's not biblical, but like the pendulum is just swung, right? Like it's this lack of it being in our brain space, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Aaron, does that make sense? Hope that's helpful. All right. Cool. All right. I don't know if you have any other questions in there. You guys, you can keep them coming. And if you missed kind of the beginning, feel free to there is, feel free to keep the questions coming, and you can text them and they'll show up anonymously. 705 692 1658, and we'll get them here on our end. We won't share anybody's public information. You can drop them in the chat. And just so you guys know, there is a bit of a lag here. And so between me and Joshua, and it might be a bit of a lag too between when you drop your questions. And so feel free to share. Nothing is off limits right now. Nothing is untouchable. And there we go. Sweet. So Joshua, I've got a question for you in the meantime. What question do you wish somebody would ask that they've never asked?
Oh boy.
Yeah. What do you want to answer?
That's hard. You might have to get back to me on that one.
Okay. All right. So someone bail Joshua out by dropping one of your questions because he's stumped. I do remember that you did a stump Joshua game and you had to shave your head, right? So does this count? Do you have to now shave and dye your hair?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still pretty short.
Nice. Okay, awesome. And if you don't want to admit that the question is yours, you can just send it and say asking for a friend.
True.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, asking for a friend. Sweet. Awesome. All right. Well, I had spent a little bit of time a couple years ago when I was living close to Ottawa. I would always be invited to the public high school to talk about, or like to the world religions class, and they would invite me to come and talk about Christianity, or specifically Pentecostalism is kind of our tribe that we're a part of, and they would ask, and it was cool, but it was a little awkward as well because it was not structured at all. And I just show up and the teacher would be like, okay, you've got 75 minutes, just go. And I'd ask, like, have you done any like talk about this beforehand? They'd say no. And so anyway, it always took a little bit of time for the ball to get rolling for students to ask questions. But one of the questions that I loved answering, and I was hoping that you were going to ask me after I asked you what you were wanting to be asked, was, what my favorite Bible story was. And my favorite Bible story is the story of Balaam's donkey. So there's this man named Balaam, and he has a donkey, and God is trying to get the attention of Balaam, and he ends up like Shrek style talking through the donkey. And so I'm thinking of, and so I'm thinking of that scene in Shrek where he's like, I'm a talking flying donkey, right? And I'm just like absolutely like busting a gut as I'm reading the story, but I love it because I think that if God can use an ass like that, then maybe he can actually speak through me.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Somebody.
So that's my favorite there. All right. So Ollie asked the question, who are you, Hojabi? And I don't know. It's not me. Do you know?
I don't know either.
You don't know Hojabi. Okay. Cool.
No. Well, I can share my favorite Bible story.
Yeah, do it.
One of my favorites is definitely it's in the Old Testament, where a man by the name of Elisha had actually died. He was a prophet. He did a bunch of crazy things while he was alive, but eventually, like us all, he died. And they were about to bury his body, but it was an open grave, and his bones were just laying there, and the men in the graveyard were bringing in a different body to the graveyard, and before they could bury the body, the people of Israel, who Elisha was a part of, one of their enemies, they started to attack the Israelites like right then and there. And so these guys working at the like cemetery, I guess, they threw this other guy's body into Elisha's grave, and the moment the body touched Elisha's bones, he got resurrected. So that's got to be one of my favorite stories. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But I've always thought with that story, you know, like he was so close to God that my theory is that the power of God just like surrounded him, and his whole body was like soaked in God, so that by the time the guy touched his bones, he was able to get healed. So I like that one.
Nice. That's a good one. There is there's another question here about a better way to understand the Bible. So a member of the family was having trouble with the Bible, saying one says one thing and one says another. So is there a better way to understand it? So I'm not really sure what it's asking, like if it's talking about different translations.
Maybe it's talking about translations?
Yeah, I don't know. So, here we go. Asked mostly because she kept ranting about a real Bible with actual words. So I'm not sure about this. This is kind of an older idea. And it might be what you're asking, Aaron. It's kind of an older idea that there are some translations that are like holier than the others. Like if it's not KJV, like King James Version, which was the first English version of the Bible, then it just like isn't acceptable. And, you know, like I think that most people my age and younger would find that idea to be a little bit laughable.
Actually, Pastor Kyle.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned in Bible college, it was like first year of Bible college.
Right.
We actually learned that the KJV Bible, the manuscripts that it comes from, are actually not as good as the manuscripts that the NIV and some of the newer versions were translated from, right? Because the KJV is so old that they actually only were able to translate it from like not the greatest versions of the manuscripts that we have that they had at the time. Right. And so after another 100 years or so, we now have like, you know, NIV, ESV, and they're translated by what scholars would consider actually better manuscripts and versions of the original Bible. Right.
And then in addition to that, there are differences in terms of the different translations of first of all, I think it's ridiculous to say that like one version is holier than the other, and that like if it's not this version, it doesn't count. But there are some differences in terms of like, you know, any language that you translate, it doesn't translate 100%, you know, literally accurately, like word for word, right? Like if you speak French and you're trying to translate a French phrase into English, you can lose, there's that phrase, being lost in translation, that there are some ideas that just don't translate word for word, right? And so, you know, when I was in high school, there was a girl that was an exchange student, and she had come from France, and we were learning, Québécois French in our curriculum, and she was from France, and somebody asked her in French, like, do you have the time? Asking, like, what time is it? I'm doing this because people still wore watches, right? We didn't have phones, which is weird. I know I'm old. Yeah, we had Palm Pilots. The cool kids had Palm Pilots.
My dad had a Palm Pilot.
Yes.
I used to play on it.
Yes. And so like they had like these Pong games on them, and they were amazing. It was like this hybrid of like a BlackBerry phone before BlackBerry was a thing. It kind of looked like a BlackBerry, if you know what that is. And like it had games on it and like a calculator, but it didn't do any phone calls. Anyway, they were like, the cool thing was to get a Palm Pilot. You should Google it. But like, anyway, so this person asked in French, do you have the time? Like, do you have the time? And it translated was actually quite rude. It was like, do you have the time to go down that hall with me over there and make out, right? Like this was like the phrase that this person used. Yeah. And so she turned around, slapped him in the face, and he had no idea why until later on, right? And so you have these things that like from one language to another, because in the ancient East, they did not speak English. Right, and so you're translating from Greek in the New Testament. You're translating from Hebrew and Aramaic, and so there are translations that are like thought for thought translations, and then there are translations that are word for word translations. And so neither is like I don't think I could say that like one is right and one is wrong, but like it's healthy to understand where those translation issues are. Because it just like it would in any like translating a document from any other language, you're trying to understand the spirit of it, the sentiment of it, and also understanding like the words. Does that make sense? And so sometimes that creates conflict.
Yeah,
because
you can also.
Sorry, lag.
You can also think of like the different translations as having like some different purposes. Like, whenever I meet a new Christian, I always suggest like an NLT Bible because it has some very simple language. And if you haven't been in the church before, it might help you start to learn some of the basics and get to know things. But the English words that they use in that version are not as close to what the original Greek would have been. Right. So you shouldn't take everything word for word, but it can help a ton of people when they're really new to their faith.
Right.
But then there's a translation like the one that I use a lot is the English Standard Version, where the language is a lot harder to read, but it's a lot closer to the original Greek. So it might be harder for a new Christian to grasp, but if you're growing in your faith, it might be a good translation to have because it allows you to understand maybe what the original writers were saying better than an NLT. So you've got to understand why certain translations are written and then read them appropriately. Right. The way that fits with them.
Right. Stephanie told me about this. I don't know if it was true, but she said it was. So I'm going to say that it is because she's my wife. But she told me that she heard a story about a Bible that was translated into Russian. And it was like a literal word for word translation, and then things get lost in translation. And so there is a verse in the Bible and an idea that says that the spirit is strong, but the flesh is weak. And they translated that literally word for word into Russian. But what it ended up saying was that the wine is good and the meat is bad.
No.
Yeah. Right. So you get those conflicts like you would not just in the Bible, but in any document that has been translated over years. That happens. And so Aaron, so I'd encourage you, Aaron, actually, we talked about this. I don't know if you remember it or not. We spent a lot of time in a series called The Book. And so you can jump onto our website, cornerstonelively.com, and click on messages. And if you go down to the series, The Book, there's a lot of really solid content there that would help you kind of navigate through like the how to navigate these issues like on your own and in your family as you're reading it and trying to come to an understanding. How do we navigate those things? So it was super practical and it might be helpful for you. So how's that for you, Aaron? Is that all right? And any other questions you guys have? Awesome. Good stuff, Aaron. Well, I think I just want to add to Joshua that in the next couple weeks, this coming Sunday, and I know some of you guys sleep on Sunday mornings, and I get it, but I really want to encourage you that if you are somebody who said yes to Jesus and you haven't been baptized yet, to connect with us on Sunday or watch the replay afterwards, because we're going to talk about baptism and what it is and why it's important. And how it's a faith step, an obedience step with Jesus, and how that kind of communicates to the world around us. And so if you consider yourself to be a Christian, a follower of Jesus, and you haven't been baptized, would love for you to talk to Joshua about what that might look like. Because in the next number of weeks, we're going to figure out how to do physical distance baptism, and love for you to be a part of that. It's not something that's reserved just for adults. In fact, I grew up in an environment where like that was something that happened as like a baby. And now I understand that that's not the picture that we have in the Bible. So if you've been baptized as an infant, I'm not throwing shade at your parents for making that decision, but it's very clear that this is a decision that we make for ourselves after we've had an encounter with Jesus. And so love to connect with you and encourage you to check that out. And we're gonna do that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and if you even have any questions about what that is, or we can have that conversation as well.
Sure. Emily asked, did the French girl who slapped the boy end up understanding what he meant later? I have no idea. I don't know if she was so offended that like she just would like completely shut him out, or if she understood that there was a translation issue. I don't know. I wish that I did, but I don't know. Yeah.
C'est la vie.
C'est la vie. That's right. Oh, look at you. There we go. That's pretty good. That was good. So maybe too, if you have questions that you know that others are asking and you've really struggled with how to respond, I don't feel like we have all the answers, but this is a good place to have a conversation about it. And so if you have a question, maybe that's not necessarily coming from you yourself, you can feel free to drop that here as well, and we'll just chat about it. And in the meantime, Joshua, what is like your favorite thing to do outside of like going to school and being in ministry? Like, what would you be doing with your free time?
Oh, this isn't gonna be good. I'm such a nerd.
Let's get to know the man behind the camera.
I'd probably be reading. Yeah, I like to spend a lot of time like thinking, actually, which for a lot of people sounds like work, but it's not really work for me. So I like to read and write and read and write and read and write.
Right. Yeah, it's true. Sometimes we'll meet and we'll have like a small conversation, and then he shows up the following week with like this 20-page report, and sends it to me, and I feel completely overwhelmed and think like there's no way I have time to read all of this. Like this is ridiculous. Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you guys have questions that could have anything to do with church or the Bible or us as in ministry, or personal questions, it doesn't matter, or they could be questions that your friends are asking and you're just not really sure how to respond, we can have those conversations. So put them here in the comments, or email Joshua at cornerstonelively.com, or text them to 705-692-1658. And if you do it that way, we won't have personal information shared with anybody, and we wouldn't do that anyway. So if you don't want your name beside it in the comments, you can try it in either of those capacities. I don't know if it's the lag or if if you guys are really quiet. I don't know. There you go. What?
Wow.
Yeah. Is it an option to do neither?
Oh boy.
Yeah. Like, is this a mandatory question? Like, what if we just became friends and hung out for a while?
Oh,
right.
I know what I would do.
Okay. All right. So, are you asking that we would?
I would take the blowtorch.
Yeah.
And just melt the handcuffs.
Right. Like the chain between the cuffs. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that could work. Yeah. Like walk to a locksmith together. When I read the question, I was thinking like, is he asking, like, I thought he was asking about like your hand or the other person, not the cuffs. Like I just read it really quickly and I felt like, is he asking me about like cutting your hand off or their hand off with a saw or a blowtorch, right?
I was definitely thinking about hands at first. 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
It threw me off, man. So good on you there. Okay. Sweet. All right. There is another, he was asking about the cuffs. Okay, so that's much less concerning. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how do we approach the LGBTQ movement biblically and at the same time with love and appreciation? What advice would you give to somebody on the spectrum wanting to get closer to God? Nice. Okay. We're kind of talking about two things at once here because I think we're still on the cuffs a bit. It's a Duck Dynasty thing. And I know nothing about Duck Dynasty other than that they have amazing beers.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. But getting to this question, I know it's a big issue. It's a big issue in your generation. It's a big issue in my generation. It's a big issue in people that are older than me as well. Like it's a lightning rod, right? Like it's super controversial. As it pertains to what the Bible has to say, I mean, there are actually very few references in the Bible, like totality of what it says. We're looking at like maybe 4 or 5 references in the totality of Scripture. When you look at what Jesus says, it's such a small portion in relation to the things that he talks about all the time, like love and money and miracles. And so there's a piece of me that's really hesitant to go there in the sense that I feel like we make it a bigger deal than it is. Not to say that it's not a scriptural issue, but that I think that like our media and the church and people outside of the church wondering what the church is thinking have actually made it to be this thing that's like, the rock on which the church is built is this issue. And I just don't think that that's like biblically accurate. And it gives it more of a platform than maybe it like deserves in terms of the proportion that it's spoken of in Scripture. So, I will say though that we have had this conversation within the context of our gatherings. And so if you go on to cornerstonelively.com and go to messages in the series Untouchables, one of the questions that was asked was, what is the church's stance on homosexuality and transgenderism? And what does God have to say about it? And how would people be treated if they're a part of that spectrum and they come to Cornerstone? And so where we landed in what I said was, you don't go to hell for being gay. And the way that I know that is that you don't go to heaven for being straight. It is very controversial what the Bible has to say about it. It says that, that homosexuality is a sin and it's not popular. It's not something that people like to talk about, but it is in there. And in our conversations with people in the LGBTQ community and within the spectrum, that there may be disagreement, but there's actually a level of respect for not pretending that it's not what the Bible says. But the church historically has done a terrible job of handling this issue, because we've made it to be this big thing that these individuals cannot enter the kingdom of God. And then if you go beyond that verse and like kind of look at the surrounding, Joshua, you probably are familiar with this. It also talks about the other people who don't enter the kingdom of God, the thieves and the liars and the sinners, like that, like you cannot enter the kingdom of God without what? Without reconciliation with Jesus. And this whole idea that it's not something that somebody can struggle with and be a follower of Jesus, I think is ridiculous. That of course you can be somebody who is same gender attracted. You can identify somewhere on the spectrum and still love Jesus and still be loved by God, and yes, go to heaven. Now, God does ask each and every one of the most common response that I get from people in that community that reach out, because it happens frequently, and say, I want to connect with somebody. They say, I'm looking for a church where I can connect with God, where I can connect with God, but not being asked to change. And the problem with that is that that's not the gospel, right? That it's not. The gospel says that when we come to faith in Jesus, that he's asking all of us to change in every area of our life, in every area of our brokenness, including my heterosexuality. That it turns out that when I said yes to Jesus, God did not take away my opposite gender attraction from anyone that's not my wife. That I can still be attracted to somebody that is not my wife. And I am not condemned by that, but there is a biblical response of, here's the commitment that I made as a Christian, here's a commitment that I've made as a follower of Jesus, as a husband, that I don't act on that attraction, that I act on the attraction to my wife and not to others. And so, I don't know what you might want to add to that, Joshua. Because I think it's become something that's just so easily like, well, if you go to church, that means you hate gay people. Or that there's like those churches that put up the signs that say God hates fags. And that is just so wrong. And it's so evil. God doesn't hate. God doesn't hate people in that community, just like he doesn't hate you. I think that's just so off. And so I'm not sure what you would want to add to that, but I think that, like, let's be honest, that the church has not done a good job of responding with grace and the love of Jesus to individuals in a community that have been persecuted. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If I could just add something here, I think I've mentioned to you guys before that the program that I'm in at school is called Cultural Engagement Studies.
Right.
And the whole point of this program is to understand how to reach people who are different than you. How do you minister to people who are not like you? And one of the things that some people don't understand is that there are such things as cultures and subcultures.
Right.
And if you guys have any friends or have found yourself in the LGBTQ community, it is a subculture.
Right.
It is a group of people where they have a lot of similarities, a lot of different behaviors, activities, worldviews even. And so I don't think we've always viewed that group like that, where, just like we would do certain things to reach a different culture than my own, maybe people who lived in, I don't know, Kenya, for instance. We gotta make sure that we understand how we can appropriately and properly reach a group that is different than us. Pastor Kyle mentioned, which is, I guess, is something that we talked about just a little earlier, about assumptions, right? We make a lot of assumptions about that group, but they make a lot of assumptions about us too, because of what other people have said to them, because of what maybe pop culture perpetuates, these ideas of what church and God and Christianity is. But the other thing I did want to say, like even maybe on a more ministry and practical level, is that relationship with these people, I think, is very important.
Mhm.
I think this topic is so controversial and so on edge, and then there's a lot of sensitivity there, that if you don't have a relationship with some of these people before you minister, you start working with them, it can it can really go south, I think. And in some ways, you almost have to have a right to speak certain things into people's lives. And that goes for anything, right? That goes for beyond just homosexuality. There are certain things that you can't say to that I say to my brothers, maybe, that I wouldn't just say to a stranger. Like there's different situations. If I could just maybe share a story from my own life. When I was in high school, there was a student who was just a year ahead of me, and this student was in the LGBTQ plus community, and they did not like me very much. This person did not like me very much at all. But we ended up being in a lot of the same classes and a lot of the same clubs. And after a while, we connected a little bit. But it wasn't too serious, right? Like we were, I would consider us acquaintances at that point. But there was one time, this person didn't have a lot of friends in the specific course that we found ourselves in. Their friend group wasn't there. And our teacher said, okay, we're doing a group project here. It's partners time. And I need you guys to pick people. And this person who was sitting just in front of me turned around immediately, pointed at me and said, hey, do you want to be partners? And for me, I was thrown off guard a little bit. I didn't expect that. And for me, like, again, I will mention, this person did not like me for a long time. And for me, I just thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to let's kill this thing. And what's really funny is actually we like destroyed in that project, not to toot my own horn or anything, but we did really well. But after that, it was super interesting because there would be times where this person maybe was struggling, was anxious about a project that they were working on. And then all of a sudden, they were asking me to do something. They were, hey, can you look over this project for me? I'm really struggling with it. I need your help. And eventually, after like a couple years together, we were going to a competition together because we were both nerds and we were on our trivia team. And on the way back, we started talking about Christianity.
It's a trivia team.
And this person had a real, yeah, reach for the top. It's actually at Lively High School. Anyways, I told this person that I wanted to be a missionary, and this person had a real issue with that. But as we started to talk about this topic, eventually, after they again shared some assumptions that they had about the church with me, I had the opportunity to look this person dead in the eyes and say, hey, listen, has anyone ever told you that God loves you? Like, he loves you so much. And in a moment, I was able to share the gospel with this person, and they went quiet right after that. It really impacted this person. Personally, I don't think anybody had ever told them that before. But I don't think I would have ever told that person that in our first encounter. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They were at a point where they could take it, and I think they really did take it.
It has to come out of a relationship.
And so relationship is key. Why not have some friends in that group? Right? Why not? God could really use you because, there's a lot of people in this community who are very broken, right? Suicide rates are the highest in that community than anywhere else. They, like anybody else, they need Jesus, and they need the hope that comes with Jesus, the love that comes with Jesus, and the truth to guide them on the right track with whatever God has. Because the crazy thing is that, just like how God has plans for our lives, God has plans for their lives as well. And we got to see them pursue that in their own lives as well. So I think relationship is really, really important. Why not, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I dropped a couple links there, and the first is to the conversation that we had in response to this question that we got. So Untouchables was the series where all of the questions came from people in our community, and we allowed people in our community to vote for their questions that they wanted to be answered. And the top 4 questions are the 4 conversations that we had this past November. And so there is this conversation there. And so like it gives you a little bit more kind of stuff to work through in terms of what the Bible actually says on this subject and where we land and how we respond to it. And then I also linked to a book there. I don't know how many people here are fans of reading, but there's probably an audiobook as well. It's written by a poet named Jackie Hill Perry, and she is somebody who's been same-sex attracted and writes. It's amazing, and it's raw, it's honest. It talks about her experience of being gay and then having an encounter with Jesus and trying to reconcile those 2 things together, right? And so, you know, like I did see a comment there about like, well, why would God make it that way for them if it's just going to be like, if they can't help it? And just in response to that, I would say that like it sounds cliche almost, but we live in this broken, sinful world where there will always be some sort of thing that we need to process and work through and lay down our personal desire for what God has in store for us. And so like, I have a desire to maybe I shouldn't say this online because who's watching, I don't know, but like I have a desire to cheat on my taxes so I get more money back, right? Like I'd love to get more money back or not pay as much taxes at the end of the year. I've been in a car accident, not recently, but in a car accident where my immediate thought was maybe I could just back up and drive away and I won't be caught. Like there are these things that in my humanness that I, just like Paul says in the New Testament, I am a sinner. And that does not mean that like, because those things exist inside of me, that I have this past to not address them. It also doesn't mean that I'm condemned to hell. And the story of Jesus in the Bible is that in our brokenness, he comes out of his love for us to redeem us. And yes, there is a moment of salvation where we say yes to him, but that doesn't mean that there's not more stuff that he wants to work on, and that as we spend more time with him, we begin to look more like him, and he will bring things to our attention so that we address them, and so that we begin to look more like his son, and the witness to share with the world is actually increased. And so I would never tell somebody that like you're going to hell because you're gay, because I would never tell somebody that you're going to heaven just because you're straight. And every single one of us, I don't care who you are, like you struggle with something. And that's something that God is actually wanting to work on in your life. And that I don't think that it's a Jesus response for us to turn around and say, well, you're condemned, you're screwed, that's it. And I think the reason that there's so much tension in this issue is because so many people who have identified with Christianity over a long period of time have taken that route. And it turns out that that's not very Jesus-like. You can be full of truth and not have any grace, or you can be full of grace and not have any truth. And neither of those are healthy pictures.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Say what now? I don't know what I said. There's a lag. I don't know what you're referring to, Aaron. I don't know, Joshua. What do you think? You guys can tell us what you think too. You can give us some feedback. And what do you think, sir? Is that a fair representation of kind of how to address that? That you can address something full of truth and full of grace at the same time, and that is actually actually a more accurate picture of how Jesus deals with sin?
For sure. I think so.
Just to clarify, Aaron.
I think for me, I know I've already talked about the practical a couple times tonight.
Right. Just to clarify, Aaron, I didn't cheat on my taxes. I had a desire to do so because I didn't want to pay the government more money. But Jesus tells me to give unto God what is due to God and give unto Caesar what is due to him. And so that means to pay your taxes. And I did it because it's right. But if I'm honest with you, I didn't want to. I did not want to. I didn't want to claim that income, but I did. Not from personal desire, but from biblical conviction. That's it. I did not cheat on my taxes, but I wanted to pay less. That is the story. Sorry, Joshua.
No, it's all good. I was just going to say, I've talked about the practical a couple times tonight. And I just wanted to say, and I, by this, I don't mean like go out and like target people, I guess, but like, you know, if God is putting this community on your heart, then like why not minister to them, right? Like why not find people to be in relationship with, to encourage, to strengthen, and because I feel like we talk about this very controversial issue over and over and over, but then we end every conversation being like, okay, so this is never going to leave this conversation. We're never going to think about it again until we have another Q&A. Now, I get it that maybe in small towns or whatever, there's less of a population or whatever. But like I said, this group, even statistically, is a group that is struggling more than others. And so why would we stop at just talking about it? You know, and if God, if I was to be really real with you guys, that is a community that I feel like God has put on my heart. Maybe because of that situation that I shared with that person at high school. I don't know. It's never really been, I didn't think about it much, but as I started to go to Bible college, it was a group that God began to break my heart for, actually. I would cry over this group of people, just knowing that God does love them so much. And we got to do something about it, right? We got to be obedient. And so, and I guess this goes for anything, right? But if God puts something on your heart, seek after that. Ask him to clarify, ask him to help you, give you strength, and do it. Right? Because God will bless that, and God could do some crazy things through your life, whether it's in the LGBTQ plus community or in another community, going overseas, something like that, whatever. If God is calling you, why not? Right? Let's do something about it.
Yeah. I'm just going to tell one quick story. When Stephanie and when I was actually working for city government a number of years ago, before I became a pastor, one of my close friends, a co-worker, was somebody that was in that community. And, that didn't define who she was in my book. She was simply somebody that I cared about and we were in relationship with. And we didn't expect her to pretend to be somebody else. And we were not going to pretend to be other people as well. But, she knew where we stood and we knew where she stood, and we were still able to love one another. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And she and her partner broke up, and she was devastated. And our response was we baked her a cheesecake. That this is somebody that we love, and she's hurting, and that pain is real. That pain is real. And so we showed up. I was off that day. She wasn't. We brought her a cheesecake. We said, we love you. We appreciate you. We know you're in pain, and we want you to know we care about you, and we're praying for you. This might seem controversial in like more conservative circles, but I'm going to say that you don't need to be the voice of Holy Spirit. We can let him do that. That he might ask you to bring something up sometimes and to speak boldly with truth. But I think he always asks us to speak boldly with truth also alongside grace. Because if we're just the person on the side of the road, like holding the sign and yelling at everybody, that's not fruitful. That's not productive. That's not helpful. That's not loving. Jesus sits down with all the people that he disagrees with, and he has a meal with them, and he cares about them in these communities where nobody else cares about them. and they see those prostitutes, those tax collectors, those sinners, those unclean people, well, they can go off to the side because they don't qualify to enter into our community in this capacity. But Jesus goes into these places, and the ridiculous, like controversial thing 2,000 years ago was that somebody from the faith community who was considered clean would go into the unclean place, and according to the law, that he would be made unclean by touching the unclean. But instead it was the other way around, that when he touched them, that they became clean, that he would be in relationship with them. And because there was this understanding of a general care and love and compassion, that there was actually opportunity to speak truth. Maybe that had already been spoken, but it didn't land because the only thing that they felt was discrimination and being told you don't belong. And so I think if we were to if we miss out on being the hands and feet of Jesus and following him as our perfect model, that we almost become like those religious people that Jesus yelled at. That the only ones that we ever see Jesus really getting mad at are the religious people who are basically the Bible police telling everybody what's wrong with them and why they're doing it wrong. But Jesus comes in and he sits and he has a meal with them and he cares for them and he ministers to them. And at the very same time, he also shares truth. And we can do those things. And I would just challenge you that, first of all, let's not assume that people are not experiencing some sort of identity within that spectrum. I think that it probably happens more than you think it does. But let's follow the perfect model that Jesus has put out for us and be in relationship and care and be filled with grace and also be filled with truth. And it turns out that being filled with grace is the perfect opportunity for you to share that truth and it actually to impact somebody in their life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. There we go. So yeah, I know it's a bigger, maybe a bigger conversation there, but check out that link before. I mean, both of the links. I mean, Jackie Hill Perry is better than me, but in terms of her communication, but check it out, and it might be helpful for you. If you still have more questions, we'll keep talking another time. I think we could do that, right? Yeah, I probably
for sure
upset the apple cart. I probably rocked a boat or two. How many emails do you think I'm going to
get? It's good. It's all good.
Okay.
7.
7? Okay. Number of completion. We'll see what happens.
Come on now.
Sweet. All right. Well, it's 7:59 here on my end, and I think we said we'd go till 8. So, any last thoughts?
Yeah. I'll just say that thanks everyone for joining us, and I don't know what you guys thought about this or not. I think this could be something that maybe we could do a couple times. Something we could do in the future. I think it could be a great opportunity to invite people out to. I know that sometimes people are just walking around with questions that they have and no one to ask them to, and so, and feel free to just do your own Q&A with your friends sometimes, I think questions are awesome. I love answering and asking and discussing questions. Especially the things that we're actually passionate about, the things that get us kind of fired up. So again, thank you for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and hopefully we'll be able to do some of this at another time. So
sweet. Yeah. All right. Sweet. So has this been helpful, guys? I hope it has. And I think it's fun. We should definitely do this again.
For sure. Yep.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, shall we call it? Say goodbye.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Good night, everybody. It's past my bedtime. I'm going to go home now. Peace.
Bye.